All right, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. It's an educational channel. We look at great theories of everything, ancient and modern, and try to do deep dives and really try to get at the into the details about what these people are talking about with their cosmologies, their all-encompassing theories, and their holistic worldviews. And today is the 8th video that we are doing on Daniel Ingram and his book called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. And Mr. Ingram is an American who has spent countless hours doing meditation in Buddhist monasteries throughout the Far East, and has had the opportunity to talk to many great masters and to soak up all of the ancient wisdom from these monasteries and bring it back to the States and articulate it in a language that we can understand. And so I see it as somewhat of a treasure. He gets really geeky on meditation technique and so on. And so if you have any questions about Buddhism, you probably can find at least an answer in this book. Now, we are in a section that is on the 3 characteristics. And so these are the 3 characteristics of all phenomena. And the first one is basically impermanence. The second one is dissatisfactoriness. And the third one is no self. And so all of our day-to-day sense experiences are utterly fleeting, and they don't have the ability to satisfy us, and they are not us. And so he's going through, we are on the first part of that, just getting into the impermanence aspect. So he had just gotten done talking about how many percepts per second do we need to be able to kind of keep track of to be able to effectively do insight meditation practice. And so I'm just going to go back about half a paragraph here and then start reading from there. So you are counting at 4 syllables a second. If you just say 1/1000, 1/1000, 4 syllables in 1 second, which is the unit of occurrences per second. If you tapped your hand each time you said or thought a syllable, that would be 4 taps a second. Try it. Count 1,000 and tap with each syllable. 1,000. Something like that. So you know now that you can experience at least 8 things in a second. You experience the 4 syllables and the 4 taps that went along with them. You probably experience all sorts of other things also, like sight, sounds, other physical sensations, and a lot more during that 1 second. That is insight practice. You are already up to at least 8 sensations per second. Yay. Now, I would push back just a little bit on that. He says you're up to 8 sensations per second. But he's referring to just 1 second. So, I mean, there's going to be 8 more sensations in the next second, and then 8 more in the next second, and you don't have You don't have time to process any of this, so it builds up very quickly, 8 per second, and then there's another second and another second and another second, so it's like, well, if it's just for 1 second, yeah, well, I can pay attention to 8 for a second, but I don't know about keeping up 8 per second for like a whole minute or something like that. Anyway, that's the idea, is that if you improve your meditation practice, you will be able to do that. It seems like it's a little bit extreme in terms of just the level of vigilance. There's obviously no spacing out there. You having to stay on the case for 8 sensations per second for your whole extended period of your meditation. But according to Ingram, if you stick with it and you practice, diligently, your perception will speed up to the point where that is doable. Okay, so let's say you tap twice per syllable. That would already be up to at least 12 things you perceived in a second. The 4 syllables and the 8 taps. That actually isn't that hard to do. You are already fast enough to really bust out some insight practices. Great job. Investigate reality that fast, and you will learn some seriously cool things. Add in noticing the intentions to tap each of those taps and the mental impressions of all the sensations you just experienced, and suddenly you are rocking like a boss in the world of insight meditation. There are faster and slower vibrations that may show up, some very fast, maybe up to 40 times per second or so, and some very slow, that are actually made up of faster vibrations. But let's just say that 1 to 10 times per second can sometimes be a useful guideline in the beginning. Once you get the hang of it, the faster and slower vibrations are no big deal. Alternately, depending on how you practice, conceiving of this as like a shower of raindrops, an animated pointillist painting, or 3D snow might help. Reality is quite rich and complex, and thus the frequencies of the pulses of reality can be somewhat chaotic, but they tend to be more regular than you might expect. Also, there are not any magic frequencies. Whatever frequency or pulse or whatever you are experiencing at that moment is the truth of that moment. However, in the beginning, you should go for faster vibrations over slower ones, and then later try for broader and more inclusive ones over those that are narrower. Don't worry if things look or feel solid sometimes. Just be with the solidity clearly and precisely, but not too tightly. And that pattern of sensations that implies solidity can start to reveal its impermanence. Be aware of each exact moment in which you experience solidity and its beginning and ending. Remember that each experience of solidity is a discrete, impermanent sensation. Also, some people find things like counting frequencies and using numbers totally annoying. So if you are one of those, just ignore those parts, as direct experience is the key regardless of whether you can count beats well. Still, the general concept that you are looking for, something changing moderately fast but still quite manageable, is key. Let it go, as those kooky Buddhists sometimes say. Many people begin practicing and really want to solidify something like the breath so they can finally pay attention to it. They become frustrated when they have a hard time finding the breath or their body. The reason they can't find these is not that they are a bad meditator, but that they are having direct insight into how things actually are. Unfortunately, overemphasizing the theory and concepts of concentration practice, which aims to perceive the meditation object as more solid and stable, creates much needless frustration for the insight practitioner who doesn't know better. You should now be able to avoid a lot of that frustration and begin to appreciate why knowing some theory about the difference between insight and concentration practices is helpful. Now, so remember, those are two of the three trainings in Buddhism. The three trainings are morality, concentration, and insight. And morality is like not related to meditation per se, not directly related. It's basically just trying to be a good person, following ethical, behavior. And then there's concentration, which is, focusing on your attention on an object, and that cultivates, certain realizations, but the cultivation of wisdom comes from insight practices, which is basically opening up your 6 sense doors, your 5 senses in your mind, so-called, and noticing all of the sensations, and the first step of this is to notice the 3 characteristics of those sensations. And that is the path to wisdom, according to, this model that Ingram has set up. So, okay. It is also worth noting here that the frequency or rate of vibrations may change often, either getting faster or slower, and that it is worth trying to perceive clearly the beginning and ending of each vibration or pulse of reality. These are actually at least 2 different sensations. It is also useful to check out exactly what happens at the bottom, middle, and top of the breath if you are using the breath as an object, and to examine if the frequency remains stable or changes in each phase of the breath. Finding the exact end of the out-breath is a commonly used exercise of great profundity and once mastered. Never assume that what you have understood is a final, fixed answer. Be alert. Explore carefully and precisely with openness and acceptance. This is the door to understanding. One last thing about vibrations. Exploring vibrations can be a lot like any other sport. We can think of it in the same way as we would of surfing or playing tennis. And this playful game-like attitude can help a lot. We're out to bust some vibrations, as Kenneth enthusiastically put it. You don't know quite what the next return or wave is going to look like, so pay attention. Keep the mind on the pulse of the sensations of your world, just as you would on the wave or the ball, and keep playing. I highly recommend this sort of speed in practice, not only because this is how fast we must perceive reality to awaken, but also because trying to experience 1 to 10 sensations per second is challenging and engaging. Because it is challenging and engaging, we will be less prone to getting lost in thoughts rather than doing insight practices. Our minds have the power to perceive things extremely quickly, and we actually use this power all the time to do such things as read this book. If you don't use that massive resolving power, you are likely to quickly get really bored and wander off to something more interesting. You can probably read many words per second. If you can do this, you can certainly do insight practices. If you can perceive one sensation per second, try for two. If you can perceive two unique sensations per second, try to perceive four. Keep increasing your perceptual threshold in this way until the illusion of continuity shatters. In short, when doing insight practices, constantly work to perceive sensations arise and pass quickly and accurately, as quickly and accurately as you possibly can. With the spirit of a race car driver who is constantly aware of how fast the car can go and still stay on the track, stay on the cutting edge of your ability to see the impermanence of sensations quickly and accurately. I will relate 4 of the many little exercises I have found useful for jump-starting and developing insight into impermanence. They will demonstrate how we can be creative in exploring our reality precisely, but please don't think of them in some dogmatic way. These objects and postures are not that important, but understanding impermanence directly is. In one of these exercises, I sit quietly in a quiet place, close my eyes, put my right hand on my right knee, my left hand on my left knee, and concentrate just on my 2 index fingers. Basic Dharma theory tells me that it is not possible to perceive both fingers simultaneously. So with this knowledge, I try to see in each instant which one of the 2 fingers' physical sensations are being perceived at any given moment. Once the mind has sped up a bit and become more stable, I try to perceive the arising and passing of each of these sensations. I may do this for half an hour or an hour, just staying with the sensations in my 2 fingers and perceiving when each sensation is and is not there. This might sound like a lot of work, and it can be until the mind settles into it. It requires the concentration of a fast sport like table tennis. This is such an engaging exercise and requires such precision, making it hard to get lost in thought if I'm really applying myself. I have found this to be a very useful practice for developing momentary concentration and debunking the illusion of continuity. You can pick any 2 aspects of your experience for this exercise, be they physical or mental. I generally use my fingers only because through experimentation, I have found that it is easy for me to perceive the sensations that make them up. In another related exercise, I do the same sort of thing. Sit quietly in a quiet place with eyes closed, but instead I concentrate on the sensations on the front and back of my head, with the knowledge that the illusion of a separate perceiver is partially supported by one impermanent sensation incorrectly seeming to perceive another impermanent sensation which it follows, such as the sensations in the back of the head incorrectly seeming to perceive the sensations in the front of the head. I try to be really clear about these sensations and when they are and are not there. I try to be clear if the sensations in the head are from the front or the back of the head at each instant, and then try to experience clearly the beginning and ending of each individual sensation. You can also do this with the sides of the head as well as the sensations that seem to be in the middle of your head. This practice also requires a table tennis-like precision. Half an hour to an hour of this can be quite a workout until the mind speeds up and becomes more stable, and this sort of effort pays off. As I mentioned above, when I am engaged with this practice, there is little room to be lost in thought. I have also found this a very useful practice for developing concentration and for debunking the illusions of continuity and of a separate self. More on that later. A few have reported that this exercise makes them nauseated or dizzy, which may come from applying too much effort and not gently allowing those sensations to just reveal themselves easily and naturally. If that happens to you, be gentle and let the sensations of the front and back of the head show themselves to you naturally. In another exercise, which is quite common to many meditation traditions, I sit quietly in a quiet place, close my eyes, and bring my attention to the breath. More than just concentrating on it, I know that the sensations that make up the concept breath are each impermanent, lasting only an instant. With this knowledge, I try to see how many individual times in each part of the breath I can perceive the sensations that make up the breath. During the in-breath, I try to experience it as many times as possible and try to be precise about exactly when the in-breath begins and ends. More than this, I try to perceive exactly and precisely when each sensation of motion or physicality of the breath arises and passes. I then do the same for the out-breath, paying particular attention to the exact end of the out-breath and then the beginning of the new in-breath. I don't worry about how I'm breathing because it is not the quality of the breath that I'm concerned with or even what the sensations are, but one aspect of the ultimate nature of these sensations, their impermanence, their arising and passing away. I also don't care much about exactly where I am experiencing the breath, as the breath is experienced in many places, from nose to back to pelvis. Some traditions get particularly picky about where you notice the breath, so if you want to give one of those a try, don't let my bias towards finding it wherever it is hold you back. When I am fully engaged with bending the mind to this exercise of following the many rich and varying sensations of breathing, there is little room to be lost in thought. I have found this to be a very useful practice for developing moment-to-moment concentration and penetrating the illusion of continuity. In the last exercise, I take on thoughts directly. I know that the sensations that make up thoughts can reveal the truth of the three characteristics, so I have no fear of them. Instead, I regard them as more glorious opportunities for gaining insight. Again, sitting quietly in a quiet place with eyes closed, I turn the mind to the thought stream. However, rather than paying attention to the content, as I usually do, I pay attention to the ultimate nature of the numerous sensations that make up thoughts, impermanence. I may even make the thoughts, which are typically occurring in the general region of my head, more and more intense just to get a good look at them. It is essential to try to perceive how you experience thoughts at a sensate level. Otherwise, you will likely flounder in their content. What do thoughts feel like? Where do they occur? How big are they? What do they look like, smell like, taste like, sound like, feel like? How long do they last? Where are their edges? Only take on this practice if you are willing to try to work at the level of trying to discern what thoughts actually are rather than what they mean, represent, or imply. If we begin to explore carefully, we will realize that thoughts are made of many types of sensations, sounds, sights, physical feelings, even tastes and smells, but they will often, though not always, be associated with one predominant sense door. If my thoughts are more auditory, as in inner talk, I begin by trying to perceive each syllable of the current thought and then each syllable's beginning and ending. If they are visual, as in mental images, I try to perceive every instant in which a mental image presents itself. If they seem physical, such as the memory of a movement or bodily sensation, I try to perceive exactly how long each little sensation of this memory lasts. This sort of investigation can be fairly easy to do, and yet it is quite powerful. Things can also get odd quickly when doing this practice, but I don't worry about that. Sometimes thoughts can begin to sound like the auditory strobing section of the song Crimson and Clover, where it sounds like they are standing at a spinning microphone. I can hear that right now. It's a pretty great song. Tommy James and the Shondells. But check it out, because I can relate. Sometimes the images that arise internally can begin to flash and flicker. Sometimes our very sense of attention can begin to strobe. That is the point. The sensations that imply a mind and mental processes are discontinuous and fleeting. Again, this practice requires steadiness and determination, as well as precision. There is no time to be lost in the content of the thoughts, as I'm trying too hard to be clear about the beginning and ending of each little flicker, squawk, and pulse that makes up a thought. This can be an especially fun practice when difficult thoughts that can have sticky or emotionally heavy content for me, are distracting from a physical sensation. I can turn on them, break them down into meaningless little blips, little vibrations of suchness, and then they don't have the power to cause me any trouble. They just scatter like confetti. They are seen as they are, small, quick, and harmless. They have a message to convey, but then they are gone. When I am done with this exercise, I return to physical objects and their arising and passing. However, I have found taking on the sensations that make up thoughts to be another very useful exercise for developing momentary concentration and penetrating the illusion of continuity. It doesn't matter if they are good thoughts or bad thoughts, as all mental sensations are also dripping with ultimate truth that is just waiting to be discovered, and thus I can proceed in my investigation with confidence regardless of what arises. Whether our illusions are penetrated using physical sensations or mental sensations is completely irrelevant. But from another point of view, it is really good to be skilled at doing both, which comes with practice. Hopefully, these exercises will give you some idea about how we might practice understanding impermanence. Impermanence is a quality whose clear perception leads to wisdom. So just understanding this again and again can be enough to drum it into our thick heads, debunk the illusion of continuity, and once this is drummed into our thick heads, we are freer. This can be a subtle business, so be patient and persevere. Remember all three trainings of morality, concentration, and wisdom, following flickering sensations and understanding the other two characteristics of suffering and no self, or dissatisfactoriness and no self, that they manifest can be a powerful and direct cause for deep insights and awakenings. For 5 years of my practice, I was mostly a one-technique freak, and that technique was noticing how sensations flicker. I would do it as often as I could. That is, whenever I didn't have to be doing something that required concentration on the specifics of my life. I would be riding an elevator, just trying to see when I could feel each foot, or lying down to sleep and noticing how many times I could experience the sensations of my breath in each second. I also tried to notice the aspect of things for every single sensation that occurred during my formal practice. I used lots of objects, usually those that were presenting strongly at that time, and would use some variations on the above techniques as well as some others to keep me from getting stuck. That I will mention shortly. But the aspect of my world that I tried to notice things flickering, was nearly always the same. I found that by making a commitment to understanding one of the fundamentals of insight practice, I made quick progress and gained the insights I was looking for. Okay, that is the end of that section. That is on impermanence. And the next section there is on unsatisfactoriness or dissatisfactoriness. I think we're going to start that tomorrow. We're almost out of time. And we'll get into suffering or dissatisfactoriness starting tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in today. Have a